So welcome to tonight's class. I'm glad to see you're here. Thank you for being here. I know some people are searching around for the link to the class who didn't get that it was the same as last week. So maybe they'll be joining us a little later on. But I'm glad that you're here. I'm glad that you are here to learn more about boundaries. We talked about a lot of boundaries last week, and we'll talk about a whole lot more this week. And as I've said before, this is something that I enjoy talking about. So it is always good for me. So for tonight, let me get my cursor in the right place. These are the things that we're going to talk about. We're going to review the guidelines for establishing clear boundaries, discuss the importance of protecting established boundaries, how to respect other people's boundaries and borders. And then there's the article that I sent you this week called 30 Ways to Set Boundaries, a Guide for People Pleasers. And then we'll look at 2 more methods for ways for you to set boundaries in your life. And as we start our time together, I invite you to join me in a time of meditation, a time of quiet, a time of peace where we can just set aside all the things that are going on in the world and spend some time in prayer and in quiet contemplation. So if you would, join me by taking a couple of deep breaths. And then if you're comfortable doing so, I invite you to close your eyes and just sit comfortably and enjoy this time of quiet and meditation. I am willing and open and receptive to understand the big vision that the universe has for me and for my life. I am open and receptive to expanding my place and my presence in this universe. I claim that all that is good and wonderful about my future self, my awakened self, is all good and wonderful. I will continue to work on my soul's evolution and growth as I increase my consciousness in all levels of my existence. I recognize that I am not my past or my mistakes. I am in this moment free to begin anew. I am free from all thoughts and beliefs that limit me and hold me back. I am unlimited and timeless, and nothing has the power to keep me from accomplishing that which I've set my mind to do. Centered in love and light, I embrace me. I recognize the divine presence in myself and in others, one with Source and one with all other beings. I am ready to navigate unknown territory and move fully into being me, into being love, and into enforcing my boundaries that support my growth and my movement forward. And now let's just spend a moment in silence. And so it is. Amen. So this is the disclaimers that we looked at last week. After discussing boundaries and living life as all of us have, I remind you again, I'm not a counselor. I can't tell you what your boundaries should be. I have enough trouble with my own. I can't write your statements for you. And I can't ensure anybody's going to respect your boundaries, including you. So that'll be something that you have to work on and you have to guide yourself through, is respecting your own boundaries. As part of a review, I wanted to look back over what a boundary is. And these were the definitions we used last week. A line that marks the limits of an area, a dividing line. Something that indicates bounds or limits. And then the one that I like most, norms, rules, or codes that characterize an individual's personal space and environment and their sense of security and safety. Healthy boundaries provide a nurturing and safe physical, emotional, sexual, and spiritual environment for individuals. And that was from Dr. Lynn Sperry. I remind everyone again that there's no sign around any of our necks that say these are my boundaries. So when we meet people, we usually have to explain them or help them understand what our boundaries are. It's not like a big no trespassing sign, so you never know. They're more like the invisible bubbles that we have around us. So we have to help people navigate those bubbles and understand where our boundaries are and how they're going to work with us on them. It's not a science. At work, we've been working on a project for about a month now. And every time we start to cringe and go, we don't understand this, our boss reminds us that it's art and not science. Those are the kind of things that drive me stark raving crazy. I prefer science and things that are written down and are in stone and are much easier to follow. But boundaries are not, sadly, because we move them around ourselves and sometimes we allow other people to move them around. But it's important that we honor the boundaries of everybody and as well as our own, so that we can control our own life and our own time. Boundaries are a physical or emotional limit that a person defines as safe or appropriate. Boundaries are consistent, reliable, and establish that certain behaviors cannot come in and will not go out. Boundaries take time and effort to maintain. And then again, this is my favorite always. Boundaries are high maintenance for people who have them. People with unhealthy boundaries are high maintenance for others who interact with them. So we want to remember those things. So this is some new stuff that I have used before and thought it was very interesting. It's from an article from Dr. Abigail Brenner in Psychology Today from 2015. So not brand new, but certainly important information, I think. So the key question is, how do you know if your boundaries are being crossed? And these are some interesting sort of broad categories, but a lot of information in each one that help us understand when our boundaries are being crossed. And most of our boundaries fall into three categories: verbal, psychological, and emotional boundaries, and physical boundaries. So that's what we're going to talk about for just a minute. So what are verbal violations? If people are violating your boundaries verbally, it's sometimes just not allowing you to speak or to be heard. If someone raises their voice or screams at you, that's someone violating your verbal boundaries. If someone has a complete loss of integrity as the person, or their character is not exactly the people you want to be around, and you allow them to hang around with you, then that's violating your verbal violations. Gossiping about you, gossiping about somebody else, then we're violating our own boundaries verbally at that point. So we need to be careful to stay within our little box, if you will. I hate being in a box, but with our verbal violations. And I will say the same thing as last week. If you have a question, please just jump in and ask it. Unmute yourself, tell me who you are, and then go ahead and ask the question. Okay, so the second area that many of us have issues with are psychological and emotional boundary violations. So those boundary violations include things like if somebody preys upon your sense of self or your self-esteem, if somebody knows you're going through something very difficult and your self-esteem might be low, then this would be a person who would take advantage of that. It might also be somebody who uses something that you've told them in confidence. You've shared something very personal and very deep with them, and at just the moment that they can use it most against you, that's what they bring out. So they are using that against you. If somebody's lying to you constantly, criticizing everything that you do, demeaning you, judging you, manipulating you, those are all violations of psychological and emotional boundaries. The other areas are things like people making fun of you or people belittling your thoughts, your beliefs, and your feelings. People who try to make you feel guilty or shame you for some reason. People who make demands of your time and energy, even though they may not be willing to share their own with you. People who embarrass you or bully you, assuring that your thoughts and beliefs are superior to and more important, or their thoughts and beliefs, are more important than yours. Those are violations of our psychological and emotional boundaries. And then the third boundary area is physical violations. Those include when people move into your personal space. It's very interesting to me because everybody has a different viewing of what their personal space is. Some people don't mind people standing right next to them or very close to them. Others of us have a kind of a distance factor that we want people to remain in. So we don't necessarily want them right next to us or too horribly close to us unless we have invited them into that space. That's a different situation, but generally you don't want somebody just walking right up to you and into your personal space. Another violation of the physical manner is when somebody touches you or is just being too inappropriate or too familiar with you, especially if it's a sexual reference or an overture of some kind. One of the ones that I think is very interesting that is a physical violation is when people touch and handle things that belong to you. You know, sometimes people know what is most important to you. So if they stand there and just hold it in their hand or mess with it, that can kind of set off your boundary issues. So you want to be careful with that. People who touch your cell phone, your computer, those are very personal things to me, and I don't really want a whole lot of people touching those. People who damage or destroy your personal property, or people who threaten you with physical harm. Those are all in the physical realm. So it takes a lot of involvement from several different people over a period of time to get the hang of who you want in your life. A lot of us have been through those experiences. People that we thought were exactly who we want in our life, not so much anymore. So we move along, or they move along, or whatever, we move along into a different direction. And you want to know that the people who are in your life understand you and respect you. And they will also respect and understand your space. And basically, you don't want toxic people, which we talked about last week, in your life. You want to avoid those people in any way that you can. So this author also had some tips, 7 to be exact, on how to establish healthy boundaries and how to move along. And the first one is know thyself. So really just getting to know yourself as best you can is important. And this means that you have to figure out what is really important to you, what you really value apart from anyone else. So that's where the things like knowing your values, writing down what your values are, going through one of the exercises that we talked about last week, where you list the things that are most important to you and then list what it is you did all through the week. Know what matters to you and what it is that is of value to you. You have to get into your own inner world, and that requires a lot of work for most of us to really understand what it is we're comfortable with. What of our beliefs are we actually comfortable with? Sharing what emotions and what feelings and and ideas with other people are we comfortable doing? So those are important things for each one of us. Basically, the better we know ourselves, the better we are able to understand and choose significant others that best mirror the kind of life experience you want to have. And that's extremely important. So know yourself, or know thyself, is the first one. The second one, take responsibility for yourself. This means to become aware, to develop the capacity for active, conscious involvement, to know what needs to be done for yourself. So a lot of this one has to do with self-care. By setting your own boundaries, you're telling others exactly what you want and how you expect to be treated. You're basically setting your limits about who can come into your space and what you expect of others once they're in that space. So you want to know maybe how you want people to talk to you, how you want them to respond to you, if you're okay with people touching you, and how they're going to treat you both psychologically and emotionally. And a lot of that is just taking responsibility for yourself. And when someone violates your boundaries, telling them no. And that's hard to do because you're likely going to insult someone or lose a friend along the way. But it's okay. When you have your boundaries in place, you need to be able to say, that's one of my boundaries and I'm not going to tolerate that. One of the things that is taught in a lot of Unity classes is that you're not responsible for the feelings, actions, beliefs, or efforts of other people. And that's true, you're not. But if someone is around you and again is violating your boundaries, then you get to react in the most appropriate way. So you're not going to just let someone take advantage of you or interfere with your boundaries. You need to speak up, excuse me, and say to them, this isn't okay. The third thing, develop a healthy respect for yourself. The things that shape our character are all of the good things that have happened to us in the past, but also all of the mistakes that we've made along the way. That's who shapes who we are. That is what shapes who we are. And basically all of us remember the mistakes and a few of the good things. So one of the things we need to do is develop a healthy respect for ourselves, is to stop dwelling on those mistakes. Things I did when I was 20, 30, 40, 50, I don't need to dwell on those anymore. It's a new time, it's a new experience, and it's time to move forward in my life. Nobody gets to define you but you. So even though other people can have opinions of you, and I know we teach in some of the other materials that, you know, your opinion of me is none of my business. And I totally believe that. But we do have to tell others what we expect. And we need to be very clear about who we are and about developing a healthy respect for ourselves so that we know where our boundaries are and know how to get other people to pay attention to those. The fourth one is called heed the warning signs. Stay away from anyone who has their own agenda. Or maybe they don't think anything about pushing your limits or their limits. They don't think anything about invading your space. You need to avoid those people as much as possible. I believe it was Maya Angelou that said, if someone tells you who they are, believe them. And if that's not the correct person, then I apologize. But the bottom line is, if you've been around people long enough, you know who they are. And believe who people tell you they are, because it's not necessarily going to change over time, even though we may want it to or try to change them. Some people, the more you resist them, the more they try to engage you. And it'll always be in ways that are best for them. So I just encourage you to consider heeding the warning signs so that you're not putting yourself in with a group of people that you would rather not be around. The next one I need to talk to myself about a lot. Don't try to fix people. Um, trying to fix people is usually a way to get love and attention or validation, because all of those to us mean we're okay, we're good. But reality is it's a waste of our time, it's a waste of our energy to try to fix someone else. Bottom line, they're not interested in being fixed in most cases. So spend your time working on yourself, not on other people. You don't need to be fixed by someone else, but you also don't need to try to fix other people. Just stay in your lane and deal with you. Most of us have enough growth that we need to do on our own, not to have to worry about others and trying to fix them. Excuse me. Realize that you are in charge of your choices. You have the right to change your mind in your direction at any time. And you may have a boundary that has served you well for years and no longer works for you. So when that boundary doesn't work for you anymore, you get rid of it. You set a new boundary and you move on to the next thing. But you get to make that choice, not anyone else. You don't owe anything to anyone. If someone mistreats you or is disrespectful of your with a capital T, you avoid those people and realize that you are in charge of your choices. You don't have to be around those people. You don't have to be dealing with those kind of people, and you get to make those choices. And then the last one on this list is to separate yourself from others. So it may be really difficult to imagine just walking away from some people, but sometimes you really do have to do that. You must psychologically and intellectually detach yourself from them and move on to what's next and what's best for you, what is for your highest and best good. So you have to be able to separate your thoughts, your feelings, and your beliefs from someone else if you're going to move on. You know that your boundaries are yours. They are going to be different than other people's. So you set yours, you stick to yours, and then if necessary, you separate yourself from those other people. Gaining a healthy perspective of others is a very good thing for most of us. Sometimes we get under the spell of someone, and then later on, maybe too late, find out who they really are. So I just encourage you, separate yourself from the people that you found to be a problem in your life and set a boundary so that they don't come back in them. We did cover this part last week, but I want to go over it one more time.
Hey, can I, this
more
is Tammy.
boundary and creation tips is what it's called.
This is Tammy. I just wanted to say thank you for the reminders there.
Draw your boundaries with confidence. When you say, this is my boundary, mean this is my boundary and I'm sticking to it. Again, it's always your right to vacillate some around that boundary, to change some around that boundary. But for the most part, draw your boundaries with confidence and say, I'm sticking to these boundaries. Be assertive. The people I know with the worst boundaries are people who are very easily walked on. And you don't want that. And I'm not saying, please hear me really clearly, I'm not saying be rude, but I am saying be assertive. There are nice ways to tell people things so that they fully understand the picture. And truthfully, if they don't get it after that, then you might need to be a little rude. But that's not where we start. So always be assertive and always be sure that you're standing up for yourself. Judith Belmont, I talked about last week for a minute. She says, you always have the right to say no without feeling guilty. You have the right to be treated with respect. You have the right to make your needs as important as anybody else's needs. I have a right to be accepting of my mistakes and failures. Good thing for me. And I have a right not to meet others' unreasonable expectations. So be assertive, be you. Learn to say no. Safeguard your spaces. What is most important to you? Safeguard your home, safeguard your car, safeguard spaces at work maybe. The things that are most important to you, safeguard your spaces. Don't let other people into them that you don't want in them. Second, then get support from your family, from your friends, from those you work with. Get them to buy into your boundaries, and that will also help them respect your boundaries. One of the best support people I ever had when I was president of a university, I had an admin assistant who had retired from Lockheed Martin. So she was a few years on me, and she protected me like crazy. You did not get by her. You didn't just walk into my office. You didn't just come for a stroll or sit and talk. She would make sure that I was well protected. And that was because I explained to her what my boundaries were. So she was able to support me and make sure that things went the way I needed them to at work, so that I could get enough done at work that I could then enjoy my home life. And then the last one is trust your gut. If your gut is telling you something is wrong, then it probably is. It really and truly is. If you're talking to someone and your heart rate starts going up and there's a tightness in your chest or stomach or throat, or you start sweating, this may be your body saying, get away. So just be careful, trust your body, trust your gut when it's time to move forward. So this is kind of the summary slide. As you're setting a boundary, establish what the boundary is, state your boundary, commit and persevere. I love that word. And then assert your rights so that you are actually enforcing the boundaries that you have. So any questions at this point? Any comments?
Hi, Hank. This is Tammy. I don't know if you heard me earlier. I just wanted to say thank you for the reminder on that list that you had for
Okay,
the boundaries.
hang on one second.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Hello? Maybe not.
Okay, so for the moment, you might have to put this in the comment box because for some reason my speakers just stopped working. So give me a second, I'll try to get those back on, but if you would, go ahead and type into the box. Huh. Okay. Okay, Tammy, can you talk again?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me now, Hank?
Thank you for that. I agree. Definitely not my job to fix anyone, but I certainly like to try. Or perhaps I just have tried too many times in the past. Now I don't try so much anymore. That might be a lesson that comes with age as well. I have no idea why my speakers are not working. They were working fine like 30 minutes ago. Let me try one more thing. All right, I can't figure out what's going on, so I'm going to leave chat up. Um, if you have comments, please type them in. Sorry to do that. Not really sure what went wrong at this point. Um, but I also don't want to spend the rest of the night trying to figure out something that I know I don't know a thing about. Um, huh. So now it's giving me difficulties on going back to that. So I'm going to leave it like it is. I'm not real sure what you're seeing on your screen. I have a feeling it's not what I think you are, so give me one more minute. So I'm not sure at this point. Can you see just the PowerPoint or do you actually see everything? Okay, so no PowerPoint at the moment. Huh. Okay, so what do you see now? Hold 1 minute. I asked for technical support. Hang on 1 minute. Test 1, 2.
Showing us fine.
These people. But there's nothing online. cursor over there, John.
Participants. I hit start your video.
How do I get this?
I hit what?
How do I get back to my thing? They're not connected. Hey, Sean, sorry about that. Can you actually hear me, Sean?
I can hear you, but Sean's still muted.
Okay. We're going to keep right on going. My apologies. I have no clue what happened. That has never happened before, but we'll keep right on going. So this next section is called practical help. Um, and some of these we talked about last week as well. Protect your most important priorities. Be more efficient at work so you can be more present at home. I think that's especially important. Start with 3 boundaries, because if you have more than 3, it's going to be too difficult. So just start with 3 boundaries and see how it goes from there. Um, Always remember saying yes to one thing means you're saying no to something else and vice versa. And also it helps to get a boundary referee, which is something like an accountability partner. So if you have that partner, um, then they can call you and ask you and talk to you about your boundaries. You tell them which ones you're trying to enforce and what you might be having difficulties with, and then see how you can work on that together. Um, Recognizing and honoring other people's boundaries. So one of the most important things, if you want people to appreciate your boundaries, is to recognize theirs. So the best way to do that is watch for cues or clues. So if you're standing somewhere and you're walking up towards somebody and they start stepping backwards, then that's usually a clue that you might be invading their personal space. So they would want you to go back just a little bit. Avoiding eye contact. If somebody's constantly looking down or looking away while you're talking to them, again, this might be a hint that they think you're too close to them, or that there's something going on there that they're not comfortable with. You also have to remember that some people are just uncomfortable in crowds and large groups. So it might not be you all the time. It might just be something that's going on with them. Turning away or turning sideways. Again, that's just them trying to move into a different space. Nervous gestures, laughing, talking really fast, or excessive hand gestures are usually indicative of something that is invading someone's personal space and their boundaries. Um, One of the things that I advise people is to always notice neurodiverse behaviors. Um, we assume that everyone is like us. And reality is there's a great big difference in most of us in the way that things happen. So just try to be very careful when you're around people. You don't know who might be on the autism spectrum, or who might be a severe introvert, or may have some other issue going on. So you always want to be very careful um, to notice those things in other people, and then to respond appropriately. So that again, you're not going into their space and you're not taking up their space. The next part is called 30 Ways to Set Boundaries. And this is the thing that I sent out earlier. And I do want to tell you a little bit about Jason Connell, who wrote the 30 Ways to Set Boundaries. Um, Dude is smart, and he is a very interesting person. So when he has the opportunity to write and be published, he writes exactly what's in his mind and on his brain. And for most of us, that's a really good thing. But reality is that he also drops a lot of F-bombs in the articles that he writes. So what you have and what I'm going to go over tonight is the cleaned up, edited, all the F-bombs taken out before I send it out to everyone. Again, I like his stuff. I think he's very smart and I think he has a lot to offer. But he does a lot of storytelling in his articles. And a lot of those stories are things that I really don't necessarily think are appropriate. So I kind of take those out and we'll work on around those. I don't know if my speakers are working or not, in all honesty. So again, if you can just send me things in the chat, I appreciate it. And I apologize. John tried. I don't know what the deal is.
Can you hear me now? Can you
It's
hear me
nice
now?
to have tech
No.
support at home.
Okay.
But in this case, didn't quite turn out the way I had thought. So if you would just send me messages and we'll work that way. So 30 ways to set boundaries, a guide for people pleasers. I love that because the reality is a lot of Unity people are people pleasers. A lot of us who have trouble setting boundaries are people pleasers. We want everybody to be happy. We want things to be going right. So these are the kind of things that he suggested and that he talked about. First, prioritize the stuff that keeps you happy, healthy, and sane. This is the most important thing that we can do. If we want to literally keep our sanity, we need to prioritize the stuff that matters to us. That's the values part that we've talked about all along. Say no to the stuff that doesn't interest you and explain why you're saying no. So let's take these all in a group. Or say no and don't bother offering an explanation. Or say no, but respectfully affirm the other person's desire. Say no by explaining that you need a bit of time to focus on your physical or mental health. So those are all different ways to say no. Sometimes you want to give somebody a reason for why you're telling them no. Other times it's really maybe not somebody you know as well or some part of their business that they need to know yours. So you can just simply say no to them at that point. So you want to make sure that you're able to do that and to do that comfortably. And again, remembering that every time we say no to one thing, we're saying yes, or the ability to say yes to something else. If you're struggling to say no in the moment, I like this. Let me think about that and get back to you. Sometimes that's the best you can do. And then you can tell them no later through a text message or on the phone or something. Because some people are more difficult to tell no to than others. So probably not where you start, but if you're uncomfortable and you need to say no and you're just not good with saying it, then this gives you kind of an out. Send the call to voicemail. So I have about 14 blocked phone numbers on my telephone, which means they all go directly to voicemail. Most of them are advertisers or people who have my number because I need them to have it for some reason, but they're always trying to sell something. So those are the people who are going to go straight to voicemail. But if you're in the middle of a situation and you know it's going to be tough to talk to someone, sometimes it's better to just send them to voicemail than to go ahead and pick up right then to try to have the conversation. Wait a few hours or days before returning a call, text, or email. I have known this my entire life, and Reverend Alice reminded us of it if you were in the class last round, that one of the things you need to be very careful of is if you're in the middle of a situation or you're not happy or you're upset or something's bothering you, that is not the time to answer emails. One day last week, I got 2 emails in a row from work that were just sending me over the edge, and I was already not feeling great. So I sent a message to Lauren, who works with me, and I said, I know you saw the 2 emails. I will answer them tomorrow or later this afternoon when I'm in a better frame of mind. And she just sent me a ha back and said, I agree, me too. Um, we had just had a very stressful couple of days, and truthfully, neither one of us wanted to respond to somebody who asked us what we felt like was a question we had already answered about 10 times. So at that point, just wait, let some time pass, and then do it. Um, when dealing with difficult people, inform them of the decision you've made instead of asking for permission or input. Don't start with, if it's okay with you, I will. Just say, here's what I'm going to do. That's where you're being assertive and you're standing up for yourself. Take a mental health day. Ignore everything you want to ignore, including work, and focus on charming yourself. Everybody needs a mental health day. When I was in Atlanta working for a university there, we didn't have mental health days as part of our sick plan. So I would call my boss, who was the president of the university, and just say, I'm sick today. And she'd go, are you really sick or are you sick of it? She knew me well, and I was usually sick of it. But I would tell her that I just need a day off where I don't have to consider any of this stuff. I can just enjoy my day off, and I can pamper myself, and I can be quiet, and I can deal with the things I need to deal with, and then I'll be good to come back to work tomorrow. Next, there are a lot of people and activities that are great for an hour, but unbearable for a day. You need to know that about yourself. And you need to be willing to say, if somebody says, come over to our party that's going to last all night, I can come over for an hour. And tell them that up front. Then they're not shocked when you turn around to leave. Let them know what your boundaries are and what you're willing to do and not do. For people who are particularly difficult and also unavoidable, only agree to hang out with them in the settings where you can tolerate them. There are people who are great friends to have in really loud restaurants or bars because you don't really have a lot of time to really do in-depth talking and getting too personal in those kind of places. So sometimes that's the best place to meet some of the people that are in our lives. If someone is really bothering you, block their email address, phone number, and social media. Don't put up with people that bother you. I would say that every one of us on here at some point have said, if this bothers you, please unfriend me on Facebook. I absolutely mean it when I say things like that. But at the same time, if that person can get through to me in some other way, and I don't want them to, then I need to make sure that I've covered that base as well. So sometimes you just unfriend them, block them out, and you're done. Now, whether or not you choose to tell them is another story. Do you think it's something that you need to do? Do you need to tell them that you've decided to unfriend them or to block them? That's entirely up to you. But sometimes you just need that break from people. I have people who are on my friend list for Facebook who have been my friend since I was in kindergarten. We are very different people and we look at things very differently. So for me, it's one of those situations where sometimes I just hide the things they're saying, and after a while, sometimes I just take them right on off of the system because it's best for me and for my mental health. So I encourage you to take a break from people when you need to and do whatever you need to do to get them out of the system. The next one, I think it's just funny. One of my favorite tricks, when someone does something that you really like, point it out and give them a compliment. We should be doing that anyway, so that we are complimenting our friends and building one another up as opposed to tearing down. This is an important one. When somebody hurts you, regardless of their intent, let them know it. So if somebody chooses to say things about you or to you that they know is going to hurt your feelings, you need to stand up and say, that's not appropriate. I'm not going to tolerate this. That is a strong boundary, and you need to make sure that we all need to make sure that we live with that one. Likewise, if something's making you uncomfortable, let that other person know. Sometimes just change the topic. If somebody's talking about something and you don't want to deal with it, just let that be done and change the topic to something else. Most people are smart enough to realize what you did at that point. Don't engage in topics that you don't like. There's no point in discussing some things with some people, and you know that. So I encourage you just to set that boundary and don't. Respect other people's boundaries, which we talked about a second ago. Be very cognizant of other people's boundaries because you want them to respect yours, respect theirs as well. If there's something that's been on your mind and you feel like it's something you need to share with someone, if it's been there for a while, do it. Don't back down, don't become afraid. Just go ahead and talk about it and get it out. If you have trouble and you struggle with your boundaries, ask for help. That's getting the accountability partner or getting the person who can support you and help you. You want to make sure that you have that person or people in your life, and preferably in all the different places that you are. Discuss boundaries and expectations ahead of time with people. That's especially true in a romantic relationship. Simply refuse to share parts of your life with people who you don't want to be close to. There's no point. Don't respond to work emails or text on weekends. We've talked about that a lot, unless you really want to. I'm thinking most of us usually really don't. Only take unscheduled calls when you're easily available and excited to talk to the other person. Memorize or use the phrase, I'd rather not answer that. That's one of my favorites. While you're at it, memorize the phrase, I'm not ready to talk about that yet. And then after you've set a boundary that's hard for you, give yourself a treat. I like that. So I'm curious, and again, you may have to type these in. I don't know if my speakers are working or not. I still think not. But did anybody try either of these two things from last week? So I will just share that I did do the first one. I've done the other one enough times that I don't really think too much about it anymore. So I did try the one, again, of the 1 week study, what's most important to me. And I still find every time I do that one that one of the most interesting things is my things I'm doing and the things I spend time on don't match up with what I say is most important. So at that point, then you have to really give a lot of thought to what is most important and are those things of value to me? And, you know, then why am I spending my time doing all these other things? So that's just one of those of being very careful. These are honestly two of the easier ones. And it's going to be interesting because the next two are a little different that we're going to talk about. So as I've said, I think it's interesting what we call things in ethics and in boundary work. And this is one of my favorites. It's called the funeral exercise. So this one starts with the words that Stephen Covey had in his book, 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. That was one of the things I had to read in college. as a business major. And it basically said, begin with the end in mind. And this is usually a really good way to plan business, but it's also a good way to plan your boundaries. So what is it you want to accomplish in life? What is it you want to be? And in this case, the funeral exercise is, what will the most important people in your life say about you when you're gone? This, I was introduced to this in an article previously, and then Michael Hyatt included it in an article he put out in November 2018. What will they say when you're dead? So basically, this is what you do with the funeral exercise. You schedule a 4-hour appointment with yourself. That's usually where most people decide, I'm not going to do it right there. I suggest going somewhere else. If you're going to try this, go away. Go to the ocean, go somewhere where you can really just sit down and be quiet. Find that quiet place that's completely private. Make a list of all the people in your life who matter the most. And then visualize your own funeral. For a lot of us, that's a difficult thing to do. We don't really want to think about our funeral. When I was in the 10th grade in high school, one of the students in our school passed away. So a part of the exercise with counselors and with one of our teachers that was a favorite of mine in learning how to deal with someone passing away your own age at that young an age was to plan our own funeral. If we could do it, what did we want it to look like? What would we want it to be? And a part of that was the discussion of all of us had been to this person's funeral. And we were kind of shocked by some of the things that were there. Not in a bad way, but just, you know, if you don't plan your own, you get what somebody plans for you. So we were kind of interested in the differences in what we thought the student would have liked at his memorial service and what others thought. So since then, I've actually kept my funeral up to date. I actually have it in a fireproof box that I change every now and then. So I go through this on occasion, but this is not looking at it from what music do you want them to play and who do you want to talk. This is, what do you want them to say? The people that are most important to you, your spouse, your partner, your children, friends that you've had for years, what would you want them to say when you're gone? And then think about for a minute, what would they really say? That's kind of an eye-opening thing to do, and it's sometimes a very difficult thing to do. But for most of us, it's a good way to go back and then go, okay, if I don't think they would say what I want them to right now, I can make changes. So I can do things differently and I can change things around so that by the time that day actually does come, what people would say would be things that I would want them to say about me. And then you use this to actually write out your plans and your boundaries. And that's a tough one to do, and it takes a lot of work. But if you've got a lot of time and are bored one day, give it a whirl and see how that one works. I also like the name of this one, the sacrificial system, which basically this one is listing again all the priorities in your life. What's important to you, what matters to you, what is it that you want to be different in your life, who is most important, what do you value, that kind of thing. So you list all of those priorities in your life, big, small, whatever they are. So it may be your children, your spouse, your partner, maybe a hobby you have, maybe God. And then you put them in order. So you list all of the people that are important to you in any order that you choose. Starting with one being most important and then working your way down. So basically your list may say something like children, spouse, partner, God. And what that means is that if something were to happen, you would sacrifice everything else for your children. If that's who you put as number one. So you would sacrifice your spouse or your partner. You would sacrifice God. You would sacrifice your work, anything that's lower on the list for your children. and then you keep going down. If next were spouse, then other than your children, you would sacrifice everything else on that list except for your spouse or partner. Once you look at this, it's a very interesting look at what our priorities are. Then again, you do the same thing. You look at your weekly activities and see how many of those activities reflect on your priorities. So in determining some of your boundaries, maybe for what you do with your time or what you do with family time, what is most important to you? So if your own sanity is high on that list, then meditation is a good thing to spend time doing. If your children are important to you, then it's important to spend time with them. If your spouse is important, then it's important to spend the time with them. And this just helps make a list for you. It's not any kind of great science in this one either. But what you are doing is saying, these are the things that matter the most to me. These are the things that I care the most about. So this is another one that I encourage you to try at some point just to see where things would go. So this is a quick review we'll look at. This is from Setting Boundaries from Therapist Aid. It was actually put out in 2019. It says, know your boundaries before you enter a situation. It's so much more likely that you'll stick to them and deal with them there in that situation if you have already decided what your boundaries are. And then it lists some things to say. What to say? I am not comfortable with this. I can't do that for you. This doesn't work for me. Not at this time. I don't want to do that. This is not acceptable, and I'm drawing the line at. Those are some wonderful statements to keep in the back of your head if something comes up that you really do not want to do or you're uncomfortable with. And remembering that they're your boundaries. You're being assertive. You don't have to answer to anybody else. These are yours. So you have the right to say no. You have the right to say, I'm not going to deal with this. I'm not going to discuss this. And then what to do. Use confident body language. Face the other person, make eye contact with them. Use a steady tone of voice at an appropriate volume, not yelling, but also not whispering. And just tell them, I'm not comfortable with this, so I'm not going to be doing it. Be respectful. Avoid yelling, using put downs, or giving the silent treatment. Be firm, but be respectful. Plan ahead. That's basically the point of all of this. Think about what you want to say and how you're going to say it before you enter a difficult situation. This will help you feel a lot more confident about the thing you're going to say or do. And then the last one that they suggest is compromise. The maybe is my part. Sometimes compromise at all. I am willing to hear out what somebody else needs to say. I will consider the needs of that person as well. But it's up to me whether or not I choose to compromise. A healthy relationship, I realize, is based on discussion and some give and take. But in some cases, again, you know already what your answer is going to be. And you just have to learn to stick to it. So this one's going to be a little hard because I was counting on my speakers working. But these are some situations that are kind of common that I found and thought we might want to talk about. So you invite a friend over for the evening, but now it's getting late. For me, that would be 8:30. You'd like to get ready for bed, but your friend seems unaware of how late it really is. How do you respond to that? How do you deal with that situation? Just think about it for a second. So for me, I always try to start on the happy side, the good side of things. I'm so happy you were able to come over tonight, but I have an early day tomorrow and I need to get ready for bed. Again, I'm glad you were here. I'm glad you were able to come over when I invited you, but now I need to go to bed, which is a very polite way of saying, and you need to leave. At one point, when I had roommates and was in college, we had a big house that was 5 bedrooms, and there were about 6 of us, 7 of us living in there. Um, and all of our friends would come over at different times. I am the one who had no problem saying, I'm going to bed now, please let yourself out. Which was a gracious hint most of the time for them to understand that I was pretty much done. And sometimes they would leave, sometimes they wouldn't. But as long as somebody from the house was up with them, that didn't really bother me a whole lot. But you just have to be straightforward. The second thing on here, you notice your roommate has been eating your food in the fridge. You never discuss plans to share food. You don't want them eating what you bought. So how do you respond? So for this one, again, straight, direct, to the point. I'd like to keep our food separate. If there's something of mine you want, then please ask me before taking it. Again, straight to the point. Explain to them what it is that matters, and that this is the boundary that you've set. Your friend calls you at 11 p.m. to discuss issues she's having with her significant other. You need to wake up at 6 a.m. So this one is tricky because if this is a genuine friend and you can tell that she really is upset and there's an issue there, you want to help. But you also know that you have a job to do and you have to be ready for it. And maybe you survive well on very little sleep. I don't. So this is what I came up with. I'm not sure it's a great answer, but I can tell that you're upset. I would like to talk to you, but I need to go to bed. Maybe we can talk tomorrow afternoon. So for me, I'm saying I'm acknowledging that the person is upset. I'm acknowledging that there's an issue there. And I'm saying I might be able to talk to you tomorrow afternoon. I will say that the maybe comes in just because I've learned not to promise anybody anything for another day. I don't know what tomorrow is going to be like, but I will do my best to talk to someone. But I also have to be honest because truthfully, if I'm already tired and you're telling me an issue, I'm probably going to fall asleep or not listen to it very well. So just a thought, one way to answer that one. You've missed several days of work due to a medical condition. When you get back, a coworker asks what happened. You feel the information is personal and do not want to share. So with this one, I would just be blunt again. I'm sorry, but I'm not comfortable sharing that information. You may want to say, and I'm doing much better now, if that's true. But truthfully, that's not any of their business either. Reality is, if you're just a coworker, even if it's a friend who's a coworker, I'm not comfortable sharing that information. I don't know you, my medical history. So I would try to keep those, again, as far away from being put out for everybody's business at work. So I would like to ask if there are any questions, but I don't really know how to do that at this point, unless you type them in. I am reading what you type in, I promise. The value of having multiple computers on my desk. But that really is the end of everything that I was going to talk about today. And I do appreciate your being here. I appreciate your being online tonight. I did get some messages that people couldn't find the link and didn't remember that it was the same one as last week. We'll just deal with that as it comes up. I thought everybody was going to get a notification tonight, but I guess not. So stuff happens. I am delighted, Sean and Tammy, that you were here. Delighted that John was able to help me and get my computer back going, and it was online as well. So if you have any comments or questions, you know how to reach me, both of you, so you can just send them to me. And I do want us to take a minute for a closing prayer together. So if you would just join me now in a quiet moment, take a deep breath. I know that God is a guiding light in all the universe. Loving Spirit is always guiding me, leading me, directing me. I know that this guidance leads me in all that I think, all that I say, and all that I do in every area of my life. And it is all for my highest and my best. Thank you, Spirit, for the privilege and ability to pray and to know beyond all doubt that the prayer is answered the minute I pray it. I release these words, knowing that they are done unto me just as I believe and just as I claim. I acknowledge that I am power in this universe, but I am not called to be everything to every person. I acknowledge it is okay to take off my cape and to rest. And in my time of rest and silence, I know what is mine to do. And so it is. Amen. Again, thank you for being on tonight. I appreciate your being here. I hope this has been helpful. And I look forward to seeing both of you, all of you, in person soon. Goodness, I miss you all so much. Take care. Love you both. Bye-bye.